You're listening to the Modern Saxophonist Podcast.
Welcome to the Modern Saxophonist Podcast. This is the Monday Masterclass. This week, we are so excited to be joined by Ronda Taylor, who has been with us on the guest spot. And so, welcome, Ronda.
Thank you.
So excited to hear what you have to say today. And so, I'm just going to go ahead and give you the floor.
Awesome. Okay, what I thought I'd speak about for about 10 minutes is how to begin to understand a new work of music. I think this will be airing pretty close to when a lot of people will be going back to school. And this might seem really obvious, what I'm about to talk about. However, I know that there are a lot of you out there that know you're supposed to do this stuff, but then you kind of don't. So I'm just going to refresh you a little bit, those of you who already know. And for those of you who really have never gone out on your own and independently researched a work of music while you were playing it, I encourage you to. So 3 basic things, and then I'll talk about them in detail. Number 1, do your homework. Number 2, analyze the score. And number 3, the most important one, is listen. So number 1, do your homework. Very self-explanatory. If you get a new piece of music, whether it's one you've selected or one that someone you're studying with has selected for you, you need to look up information about the composer. You need to look up information about the specific piece you're playing. Look up information about the music of that composer in general. Look up the meanings of all the words in the score. Now, all of these things, again, might seem really obvious, but what they're going to do for you, especially over a long period of time, is give you a context for the music that you're playing. There's so many examples. For instance, if you're working on Debussy Rhapsody for the first time, I would feel very sorry for you if you thought that the Rhapsody is the only thing that Debussy wrote. I see Mark on my screen wanting to chime in. Feel free, Mark.
Have at it. It's okay. You said definitely what needed to be said.
I'll go through this quickly so that it is less than 6 hours long. But if you want to discuss anything, let me know. So anyhow,
sure will.
Awesome. Okay, so just look up all this stuff. Again, it's just giving you a context for the music that you're going to be learning. The second step, analyze the score. I want to emphasize that anyone can do this. You do not have to wait until you have a certain amount of theory training. If you read music well enough to play it, then you have somewhere to start from. I'm a music theorist in one segment of my working world, and I really believe that analyzing music just comes down to identifying patterns in music. What I recommend you do, especially if you're nervous about this kind of thing, is go from big to small. Go from macro to micro. So in other words, if you're working on something for the first time, maybe it's the first movement of the Creston Sonata, don't try to figure out what's happening in measure 1, beat 1, and see how that corresponds to the rest of the movement. That's a waste of your time. Go for big sections of music. Where does the music change and then stay different? Examples of changes that usually mean you're in a new section are changes in time, pitch material, style, texture, etc. The other thing you can look for as far as delineating new sections in music are returns of things. This is where motives, pitches, styles, and tempos might be coming back and then staying that way. So maybe the first time you try to analyze something, you take your best guess and you find that you think there are 5 sections. I'm just guessing, we'll pretend that there's a piece you're looking at that has no title. You think it has 5 sections. As you start to work on the piece, then you should then take each section of those 5 and break it down even more using that same set of criteria as much as you can. Again, a lot of this might be you taking your best guess, but as you continue to practice the piece, that will tell you, whether or not you agree with yourself a week ago. The reason why it's important to analyze the music is because if you understand where you are in the music and you understand why you're playing what you're playing, it will have more meaning for you, and it will be easier for you to actually make a decision about how you're going to perform the music. If you don't understand the music, then you're just playing notes in a row, and you'll never really have the kind of mastery that hopefully everybody is shooting for. So that's step 2. Third step is to listen. Like I said, this is the most important one. Listen to as much as you can of this composer's music. The composer might be a relatively unknown composer. Maybe you can only find 3 or 4 works that have been recorded by that composer. Fine, who cares? Listen to them. Listen to them like crazy. Maybe you're going to play something by Luciano Berio, who has an enormous catalog. Awesome. Start with the time period that is the most relevant to the work by Berio that you're playing, and then expand out from there. But the same way, if you were going to be an actor, that's a whole nother set of things. But let's say you're an actor in a play or a movie. Let's say you had to have an accent of a certain kind, right? British accent, whatever. Wouldn't you go listen to people speaking British English before attempting your accent? If you're learning Spanish for the first time, I would hope that you're listening to people who are native Spanish speakers all the time, because that's what you want to sound like. So listen.
Por favor.
Oh, so many things. So many things.
Couldn't resist.
Lo siento. All right, entonces, I'm moving on. Listen to recordings of the specific work you're playing. Now, this is a caveat, especially for younger players. I'm not recommending that you listen to recordings of the work you're playing so that you can be shown how to play the work and try to imitate that person. You should be listening for whether or not you agree with that person's interpretation, okay? And listen to as many as you can. Depending on who you are and what your aesthetic is, you might find that Arno Bornkamp's recording of a certain piece makes sense one day, and Claude DeLong's recording of the same piece makes more sense a different day. But it's about educating yourself when it comes to this work. So, and then finally, pick whatever your favorite recording is, listen to it, and thinking back to that second step as far as analysis go, when you listen to this piece, what do you notice, both intuitively and intellectually? If you feel like you're hearing a section, in the music that you actually haven't noticed by looking at the score, your ears are more important than your eyes anyways. Figure out why. Why do you notice, or, why do you hear something a certain way, but you're not noticing it when you look on the page? There's really no end to like how much it's going to help you to be listening to this. So,
right. Isn't that one of the most amazing things? It's what's actually not there that tells you more information than what's actually there.
Totally. I really feel strongly that the one thing that you can get from listening to a good recording of a piece is, again, on this very intuitive level, you can ask yourself, what are the characteristics of this piece? And then, the hard work is asking yourself, what skills do I need to have as a technician to execute this effect? I mean, something that I used to be obsessed with as a player, I mean, I still am, actually, is anything that gives the illusion of timelessness. And as wind players, one example of just, okay, timelessness, what the heck is that? Unless you are circular breathing flawlessly, assuming you have to take breaths, so much of that has to do with, number one, how you use your air while you're playing, but then also, what is the nature of your release? What is the nature of coming back in? So those are skills that you would then want to work on in order to play some piece that calls for that. So that was a really fast and dirty list about how to get started on a new work of music.
Well, okay, so let's talk about a few things because I one, really concise. There's so much to unpack in all of that, and we're not going to do that here. But with because each and every single thing that you said had multiple levels of that can go along with it. But analysis, I really loved how you put the simplicity of it, and I'm definitely going to bring that to my students and make sure they listen to this. So when you're analyzing, you presented a couple of things that I think were so simple in it, is that we don't have to wait.
Yes.
And I find so many students who just, I don't know that yet.
When I was thinking about what to talk about today for the masterclass, I was remembering the basic freshman year. Here's what it is at most accredited universities. You have applied lessons. If you're a saxophonist, let's say you're working on Creston or Mio, something like that.
Right.
So applied lessons. You have music theory. The entire first year of music theory will be dedicated to the vocabulary and syntax of learning a Bach chorale. So music theory, you're hanging out, but you're hanging out with Bach. History starts with Gregorian freaking chant. And if you're lucky, you get past the Renaissance before, winter break. And I can remember being in school, and I was just happy to be studying music. I didn't really think too hard about anything overlapping. And there was some point later, maybe my junior year, where finally something in a history or theory class actually was relevant to saxophone in some way, or to a composer that had also coincidentally written for saxophone. And I was like, oh, I know about this composer, or I've heard of this, I've heard of Debussy already. And I realized, oh my gosh, like the vocalists have been getting this benefit from day one.
Right.
They're
studying the arias in high school of these guys.
Right. And just they're dealing in their history and their theory classes, they're dealing with literature and vocabulary that's directly relevant to the repertory from the very first day.
Right.
We have this weird disconnect where, our music is it's more modern earlier on just because of where we fall historically.
And if we go with any history class, if there is a part of time period that they end up eliminating just due to time structure of the syllabus, we end up missing out on the 1930s to present day.
Yeah, anything World War II and beyond. Yeah, you lose it.
And that ends up ruining a sense of relevancy for saxophonists, because when we're looking, it's so funny looking at even the Crescent Sonata. I love using it as a way to go, you need to learn your scales, because there is such a difference language of all the different scale that are implemented in that first movement, that you sit there and you go, yeah, I mean, you can't neglect one just because you don't like it. It's used. And then not only that, you go to a very, you go to the Mio and you're going to start talking about chordal harmonies. Well, you're not. I started talking about getting that introduced in my master's degree. I mean, that's not something in theory that you're really going to be too concerned. You're going to be building block chords and doing chorales for a while, and then the analysis ends up being Bach and Tchaik and Richard Strauss.
And like a big like danger too that can happen is well-meaning students who only know how to analyze common practice period music then like take a piece that is not that language and try to superimpose that formatting onto it, and it doesn't work because that's not how that work is constructed. You definitely, whatever you're looking at, I guarantee you the composer cared. The composer cared about organizing it, and you need to let the composition tell you how it's organized.
I mean, not to get on a complete theory discussion as a result. It was amazing. I always thought the one chord defined the key, right? Look for the one chord. Oh no. I remember having this discussion with our wonderful Dr. Murphy, from University of Arizona. Love that man. And we sat down and And here I am doing Tristan and Isolde and going through. I'm like, I can't find a one chord. And he goes, of course you can't.
Right. Then the opera would be over.
It
would have all been
exactly
because
that's
it.
it.
We sorted it out, guys.
The
Go
last
home. It's good.
4.5 hours. Then we get 3 minutes of the one chord, and that's it. So it's like, no, you got to look for the dominant 7. Oh, okay. So there's things that are going to come along your for all those students listening. There's things that are going to come along your path later on, and some other things, some revelatory. The best thing that I just want to piggyback on is the fact that you go and try to figure it out yourself, and it's okay if you're wrong. It really is okay. And if you have a teacher, they've been through it. And they can at least answer some of the questions for you, whether they're a theory god or not.
Well, and something I try really hard to make clear to my students is I would much, much rather have a student go on their own and try to figure something out on their own and come back in the next week with what they figured out, even if they're dead wrong, even if they're completely wrong, because then that tells me as their teacher where their head is at. And it's an opportunity for us to start talking about how to do this better the next time they do it. When they don't do anything, I have no way of knowing if they get it or they kind of get it or if they don't understand anything. I've nowhere to go with that. So,
right.
It's just like, that whole thing of like playing an ensemble where if you're going to play in an ensemble, just go for it. Play your dynamics really extremely. Because that way the conductor knows that there's a palette. Same way when you're talking about the intellectual aspect of playing music. It's, same thing. And
then on the listening aspect, there's so many of my students that want to gear towards what you said, which is they're only listening to find their favorite recording.
Right.
And they're not listening actively to find elements and be able to discern accurately why do they do it that way? What makes that so important for them to do in that way that I'm just going to throw this out there that like to say the fifth movement of the Tableau de Provence, why did they slow down in that middle section before the why did that happen? It's not really that
and why
did that person choose,
and why doesn't it happen on other recordings?
As a result, I think everybody, if you just look into it, you try to find the character. And my thing is that when I try to find character, I just try to find 3 adjectives that describe that section of the music.
Yeah. I love that.
Find three words, just 3 little words that describe that section. And if you can find, get a thesaurus and start looking into it.
I love it. I
used it. Well, I used it when you were talking about your CD. I love finding character in the music and what you're going for, and composers love hearing that you're thoughtfully trying to figure it out. Doesn't mean that you're right. It doesn't matter, really. You're being thoughtful.
Yeah, it doesn't matter at the beginning of that process.
Okay, fair enough.
I just want to add that.
It really does matter at this point.
And speaking of that, just one other thing I'll say, because I didn't include it explicitly on the list. If you are fortunate enough to be playing the music of a person who is still alive, definitely take advantage of the ability to contact that person after you've done your homework, like after you've done all the basic research you can do. If there's still something about the piece that you feel is mysterious, again, like you were saying, Mark, like, composers are being thoughtful when they write a piece of music. Like, it's not someone intentionally trying to make you do a thing you don't want to do. Someone writes a piece of music, they want people to play it. And if by contacting the composer and asking them a question, you are being able to play their piece better, they'll be thrilled to talk about it. I've never had a composer be upset or negative because I wanted to understand their music better. Even if it feels like a dumb question, it's going to be a good thing for you to do. So just one other thing I'd encourage people to do.
Well, folks, that is one good way to start this school year for you. And I'm gonna thank Dr. Ronda Taylor for coming on, being our guest, and so privileged. And just thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. It's been fun.
Yes, and for everybody who's just listened to this one, we've got 2 podcasts of interview that I strongly suggest you listen, and please check out Ronda's new CD, Necropolis, and also all our other offerings that you can find on iTunes, Amazon, and with that. Where can they? What's your email to where they can contact you?
My email address is my first name, RHONDA dot the letter J dot my last name, which is TAYLOR @gmail.com.
And as stated, that you should contact the composers. I also strongly suggest if you have a question that there was something in here that sparked something and you wanted to contact Dr. Taylor, I'm sure she'd be more than happy to respond.
Absolutely.
Back. And with that, I'm Mark MacArthur. This is the Modern Saxophonist Podcast. And you can also email me for questions or interest in being on at themodernsaxophonist@gmail.com. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Yeah!
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Modern Saxophonist Podcast. You can find us at www.themodernsaxophonist.com. We're also on Twitter @themodernsax.